It's a moment that could change everything. Marcus Ellis, just 20 years old, was about to deliver a pizza to one of Silicon Valley's most powerful tech companies, TechNexus Solutions. He never imagined that this simple job would lead to the most shocking moment of his life. As he stepped off the elevator, the hustle and bustle of the building faded, and his eyes locked onto something impossible to ignore. A group of engineers frantically discussing an algorithm that was losing the company millions every single day. How could they not see it? Marcus muttered under his breath. The code on the screen was a mess. The system was crashing constantly, unable to handle even 200,000 simultaneous queries. It was a problem that could easily cost the company over $100 million this quarter. And yet, no one seemed to notice the obvious fix. His hands clenched, and without thinking, he found himself walking towards the group. "You're using linear search where you should be using hash indexing," Marcus said, his voice steady but sharp. "That's why the system's crashing." "It's not that complicated." The engineers froze. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to mockery. How could a pizza delivery guy, someone who wasn't even in a tech role, understand what they couldn't after months of work? Then, the CEO, Richard Cunningham, a 50-year-old with a perfectly tailored suit and an icy demeanor, stepped in. He laughed, a low, arrogant chuckle. "Kid, do you have any idea how many PhDs in computer science have been working on this problem for 6 months?" Marcus didn't flinch. His heart raced, but his mind was clear. "I know you've already lost $97 million this year because your system crashes every time you try to handle multiple queries," he said, his words hitting harder than anyone expected. What followed wasn't just a challenge. It was the beginning of a revolution. A revolution that would shock everyone in that room. And it all started with a simple pizza delivery. Marcus Ellis grew up in the heart of Oakland, California, where the streets were lined with opportunity, but not for everyone. The city was known for its vibrant culture, but also for its struggles. Marcus lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment with his mother, Janet Ellis, a determined and hard-working woman who worked as a janitor in multiple office buildings around the city. Despite their financial struggles, Janet always made sure Marcus had everything he needed, except a traditional childhood. While his friends were out playing basketball or hanging out, Marcus was home, studying. His mother worked late nights, and Marcus would often sit at the kitchen table, doing homework by the dim light of a lamp, while his mom cleaned the offices of some of the wealthiest companies in the city. Janet didn't just clean offices. She cleaned up the lives of countless people she'd never know, all while dreaming of a better life for Marcus. She believed deeply in the power of education, even if she didn't have a formal education herself. She would often tell Marcus, "The only thing they can't take from you is your mind." Those words became his mantra. But it wasn't just about surviving for Marcus. It was about thriving. Every night, as his mom scrubbed floors, he silently promised her he would never let her sacrifices be in vain. Though they lived in a neighborhood where many people gave up, Marcus saw something different. He saw how hard his mom worked to make ends meet, how she would often stay up late with aching hands but never complained. This drive was what motivated him to push forward, despite the odds stacked against him. He was smart. In fact, he was more than smart, he was brilliant. But that brilliance was rarely noticed. Teachers looked at him as just another kid from a tough neighborhood. But Marcus knew better. He had a gift for technology, a knack for solving problems others couldn't even see. And even though he had been offered a full scholarship to attend Stanford University at 16, he turned it down. Why? Because someone had to take care of his mom. Instead of stepping into the world of higher education, Marcus dove headfirst into the world of self-learning. He didn't have the luxury of a classroom, but he had the internet, books, and late-night hours. Marcus learned programming languages, delved into the intricacies of machine learning, and mastered algorithms. All on his own, through free resources, forums, and online tutorials. He'd sit in libraries for hours, absorbing knowledge that would have cost thousands at a university. Despite his talent, Marcus didn't have the luxury of being recognized for his skills. Instead, he worked as a pizza delivery driver, scraping by, making just enough to keep the lights on and buy his mom her medication. But deep down, he knew his time would come. He knew that the knowledge he was gathering, bit by bit, would eventually allow him to break out of the cycle. Little did he know, his path would intersect with one of Silicon Valley's biggest tech firms, and it would start with a pizza. Marcus Ellis wasn't just any kid from Oakland. He was a force waiting to be recognized, A quiet storm that would shake the very foundations of a multi-million-dollar company. Marcus stood there, his eyes locked on the engineers in front of him. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. His words had dropped like a bomb in the room, and for a moment, no one knew how to react. The group of highly trained engineers, who'd been working day and night on this problem, were frozen in disbelief. How could a pizza delivery guy, someone who didn't even have a degree, possibly know more about their multi-million-dollar project than they did? The silence that followed was deafening. Richard Cunningham, the CEO of TechNexus Solutions, finally broke the stillness with a low, mocking laugh. He was the type of man who never thought twice about using his position to belittle others. His perfectly pressed suit, neatly combed hair, and cold eyes seemed to radiate an air of superiority. "Kid," Cunningham said with a sneer, "you do realize we've had a team of PhDs working on this for 6 months, right? Do you really think you can just waltz in here and fix everything with a few words?" Marcus felt the heat rise in his neck, but he didn't back down. He could feel the eyes of the entire room on him, some skeptical, some amused, and others downright mocking. But he wasn't afraid. He'd spent his entire life fighting against the odds, and this was just another hurdle. He took a deep breath, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not saying I know everything," Marcus replied, glancing at the screen. "But I can see the problem. You're using linear search when you should be using hash indexing. It's costing you millions. Fix that, and your system will stop crashing." There was an awkward pause before one of the engineers, a man in his mid-40s with a thick beard, scoffed. "What do you know about programming? You're just a delivery guy." The word stung, but Marcus didn't flinch. He'd heard worse. The frustration and arrogance in the room only fueled his determination. "I know you're losing $97 million this quarter because your system can't handle 200,000 simultaneous queries. I also know that if you just optimize your algorithm, you'll cut your processing time in half," Marcus shot back, his tone unshaken. The room went dead quiet again. This time, it wasn't just skepticism, it was shock. Cunningham's confident smile faded. The VP of Technology, Dr. Harrison, a middle-aged man with glasses, stepped forward, narrowing his eyes. "And how would you know that? We haven't publicly released the data on our losses." Marcus glanced at him briefly. He knew he couldn't reveal how he'd pieced everything together. His mother worked in that building for over 15 years, cleaning offices and accidentally leaving documents behind that Marcus had studied during his late-night homework sessions. But he couldn't risk embarrassing her, so he simply said, "Just observations." The tension in the room thickened. It was clear now that the situation was no longer just about solving a technical problem. It had become personal. Cunningham's eyes narrowed. "All right then, genius. If you're so sure you can fix this, why don't you prove it? You have 15 minutes to show us what you've got. If you can't make a noticeable improvement, you can pack your bags and leave. And don't come back." Marcus felt the challenge sink in. 15 minutes to prove himself. 15 minutes to change everything. The engineers behind him exchanged skeptical glances, murmuring among themselves. Some of them seemed genuinely curious about what Marcus could do, while others were just waiting for him to fail. "Fine," Marcus said, his voice calm. 15 minutes. But when I fix this, I want you all to remember one thing. You judged me by my cover." The clock started ticking. The challenge had been set, and Marcus wasn't about to back down now. The atmosphere in the room was electric as Marcus stepped toward the terminal, his heart pounding, but his mind as clear as ever. 15 minutes. That's all he had to prove that he was more than just a pizza delivery guy. He knew what he was capable of, but the pressure was intense. He had to deliver, both for himself and for his mother, who had sacrificed everything for him to have a chance at something better. The engineers, arms crossed, leaned against the walls, watching with varying degrees of disbelief and curiosity. Cunningham stood near the back, arms folded, his expression unreadable. The clock on the wall began ticking down from 15 minutes. Marcus sat down at the terminal and began to type, his fingers moving with practiced precision. The screen in front of him displayed a jumble of complex code, lines of algorithms struggling to process data in real time. Every few seconds, the system was crashing. The company was hemorrhaging millions because of a simple flaw, one that no one seemed to be able to solve. But Marcus could see it. The solution was right there. hidden behind layers of overly complicated code. He started by analyzing the structure. His mind raced, breaking down the issues and rebuilding the system in his head. First, the data structure. It was obvious. The team had used a linear search algorithm, one that was slow and inefficient. This was a high-traffic system, designed to handle thousands of requests simultaneously. With linear search, it was no surprise that it was crashing. The process was just too slow. He quickly shifted gears. Marcus knew that the only way to solve this was to use a more efficient method: hash indexing. With hash indexing, the system would be able to handle the data in far less time, processing queries in seconds instead of minutes. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he restructured the code. He had no room for error. Each line of code had to be perfect. Each command had to be precise. As the minutes ticked away, Marcus was so focused that the world around him seemed to disappear. He was locked in a zone, completely immersed in the task at hand. The room behind him was still. The engineers had stopped whispering. Some of them were starting to glance nervously at each other. They had no idea how this kid, this delivery guy, was solving their problems so quickly. One engineer, a young woman with glasses, stepped forward, clearly intrigued by what Marcus was doing. "Are you seriously rewriting the entire system?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have time for small talk. Instead, he hit enter, running the new code. The system was processing data faster than anyone could have predicted. He quickly tested it with 200,000 queries. What had been the breaking point before? The results were instant. The screen flashed with new numbers. It was working. The system was holding up, processing all 200,000 queries in under 3 seconds with 0 errors. 0 crashes. The engineers leaned forward, their eyes widening. This was impossible. No one could fix the system this fast. But Marcus had done it. His hands were steady, but inside, he felt a surge of excitement. He had just solved a problem that had baffled some of the brightest minds in the tech world. But this wasn't just about fixing a system. It was about proving something bigger, that he was capable of more than they could ever imagine. He looked up, meeting the eyes of Cunningham, who was standing silently in the back. Marcus didn't need to say anything. The look on Cunningham's face said it all. The clock had run out, but Marcus had already won. For a brief moment, the room was completely silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the computers, processing data at a pace no one thought possible. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers still resting lightly on the keys. The screen in front of him flashed with confirmation after confirmation. The system was stable. It had processed 200,000 simultaneous queries in less than 3 seconds, without a single error. The previously crashing program was now running smoother than it had ever been. The engineers stared at the screen in disbelief. It was like they were watching magic unfold in real time. A few of them exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what to say. How could this kid, this pizza delivery guy, have done what they, with their years of education and experience, couldn't accomplish in months? One by one, they stepped forward to inspect the code. Each line was precise, elegant even, and it was clear Marcus had not just fixed a broken system, he had redefined it. Dr. Harrison, the VP of Technology, a man who had seen his fair share of genius moments in his career, was the first to break the silence. He leaned in closer to the screen, scanning the changes Marcus had made. His eyes widened as he realized what had just happened. That's not possible," Dr. Harrison muttered under his breath. Marcus didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "It is possible. You just needed to look at it from a different perspective." Richard Cunningham, the CEO, stood frozen in the back of the room. His face had lost its usual smug confidence. He had expected failure. He had expected the pizza boy to stumble, to embarrass himself in front of the entire team. But now, as he stood there watching the system run flawlessly, something inside him shifted. A mixture of confusion, frustration, and disbelief passed over Cunningham's face. How did you do this?" His voice was quieter now, the arrogance gone. Marcus stood up slowly, meeting Cunningham's eyes. "It's simple," he said. "I didn't overcomplicate it. The problem wasn't with the code itself. It was with the way you were looking at it. You were using the wrong data structure for the job. I just optimized it, stripped away the unnecessary parts, and made it efficient. There was a long pause. The engineers, who had been skeptical, now stood in awe. Some were shaking their heads, while others were visibly impressed, trying to wrap their minds around how someone without formal credentials had pulled this off. It was a moment of reckoning. Cunningham cleared his throat, trying to regain some composure. This is beyond what I expected. His voice was barely above a whisper, but there was a certain respect in it now. It was the first time he'd acknowledged Marcus's brilliance. Marcus didn't let the moment drag on. I didn't just fix your code, he said, turning toward the group. I fixed the way you think about problems. And that's what this company needs. The room shifted. The once dismissive engineers now regarded Marcus with a mixture of admiration and, for the first time, respect. They realized they had been wrong, not just about his abilities, but about the value of looking beyond appearances. This wasn't just a young man who had fixed a system. This was someone who had just shown them the true power of innovation and perspective. Marcus's calm confidence had shaken their perception of what talent looked like, and in doing so, he had proven that sometimes, the greatest breakthroughs come from the most unexpected places. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Just moments ago, the room was filled with tension and mockery, but now, it was silent. Everyone was waiting for something to happen. Marcus had solved a problem no one thought could be fixed, but that wasn't enough. He could feel the weight of the room's expectation. It wasn't just about fixing the algorithm anymore. It was about revealing the truth, about showing the world the hypocrisy that had been lurking behind closed doors for too long. Marcus turned slowly, glancing at the screen one last time to ensure the system was still running flawlessly. The numbers were there, the proof in black and white. His work was done. But it wasn't just about the code anymore. He had a bigger point to make. Richard Cunningham, still stunned, finally spoke, but his words were laced with frustration. This is unbelievable. But don't get too cocky, kid. You got lucky. This, he waved his hand toward the screen, doesn't change anything. Marcus stepped forward, his posture unshaken. You're right about one thing, Cunningham. This does change everything. But not in the way you think. The room went still again as Marcus stood there, eyes locked on the CEO. He had a decision to make, a decision that would send shockwaves through the company, but it was a choice he couldn't ignore. His gut told him it was time to expose what had been hidden for far too long. Without saying another word, Marcus pulled out his phone. He knew exactly what he had to do. As he swiped through his files, the room became uneasy. The engineers, the CEO, everyone in the room watched with growing suspicion as he opened a video file. It was a recording, one that Marcus had been preparing for a long time. He tapped the play button. The video flickered to life, showing a private conversation between Cunningham and a group of executives. The CEO's voice rang out loud and clear on the speaker. Listen, we need to make cuts. I don't care about diversity or fairness. If we have to let some of the black employees go, so be it. It's all about bottom-line profits. And if anyone calls us out, we'll just keep denying it. The room fell into stunned silence. Marcus let the video play for a few more seconds before he tapped the screen, halting the playback. He slowly looked around, meeting the eyes of every person in the room. His voice was calm but piercing. This is how your CEO really thinks. This is what's been going on behind closed doors. Cunningham's face drained of color. His lips trembled as he opened his mouth to say something, but the words never came. His carefully curated image had just been shattered, and now there was no way to hide it. The truth was out. One of the engineers, a young man who had been quietly observing the situation, spoke up. Are you kidding me? This is what's been happening here? And you've been hiding it all along. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He didn't need to. The video had done all the talking for him. Cunningham's arrogance was now exposed, his words hanging in the air like a noose around his neck. The rest of the engineers, the executives, even Dr. Harrison, they all looked at Cunningham with disbelief, their opinions of him forever changed. As the silence lingered, Marcus turned his attention back to the group. You all may have been blinded by his power and position, but this is the real Richard Cunningham. And if you want to work for someone who values more than just profits, it's time for a change. Cunningham, visibly sweating now, tried to compose himself. This is all a lie. You've manipulated the video. No, Richard, Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the air. You did this. And now everyone knows. The room felt heavy with the weight of the truth, and for the first time, Marcus could feel the shift. The tide was turning. The atmosphere in the room had gone from tense to outright charged. The engineers, who had been nothing but skeptical and dismissive moments before, now stood with wide eyes, taking in the weight of what Marcus had just exposed. The recording of Cunningham's private conversation had ripped away the veil of corporate secrecy, revealing the ugly truth behind the company's actions. Marcus didn't need to say another word. His actions had done all the talking. But Richard Cunningham, ever the master of control, wasn't going to let this moment pass quietly. Sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, and his face had turned a shade of crimson that could rival the worst corporate failures. He shot a look toward Dr. Harrison, who had remained strangely quiet throughout the ordeal. Cunningham cleared his throat and stood taller, attempting to regain his composure. This is absurd, Cunningham finally snapped, his voice sharp and cracking. You think you can just walk in here, fix a few lines of code, and suddenly have the moral high ground? You're just a delivery boy, Marcus. You don't know the first thing about running a company. His words hung in the air, but this time, they carried no weight. The room had already shifted. Marcus had exposed the flaws in the system, not just in the code, but in the very culture of the company. And no matter how hard Cunningham tried to fight back, the damage had already been done. The engineers weren't buying his empty rhetoric anymore. They had seen the truth. A moment of silence stretched between them. Marcus didn't flinch. He had prepared for this. He knew Cunningham would try to twist the situation, to manipulate the narrative in his favor. But Marcus wasn't going to let that happen. He had one more card to play. With a calm, calculated voice, Marcus spoke. This isn't just about the algorithm, Richard. This is about a culture of discrimination, a culture that you've allowed to thrive in this company for years. A culture that's now been exposed for everyone to see. The words landed like a bombshell. Cunningham's face twisted with a mixture of rage and fear. He had always relied on his power to silence anyone who dared to question him. But now, he was the one in the hot seat, and he could feel the weight of the room's judgment bearing down on him. You're wrong, Cunningham growled, his voice shaking with fury. This is corporate business. Nothing more. If you think you can take me down over a few accusations, you're out of your mind. Marcus took a step forward, his gaze unwavering. It's not just accusations, Richard. It's evidence. And now, everyone knows who you really are. And no matter how much you try to cover it up, you'll never escape this. Just then, Dr. Harrison, who had been quietly observing the fallout, stood up. Marcus is right, he said, his voice firm. I've been part of this company for years, but I can't sit by and pretend I didn't see what was happening. The way Cunningham has treated employees, the way he's manipulated the system, it's time for a change. The room was quiet, but the shift in the air was palpable. People were starting to speak up. The truth had set a fire in their hearts, and they could no longer stay silent. Cunningham looked around, panic flashing across his face. His empire was crumbling, piece by piece. The walls that had protected him for so long were falling apart, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. You're finished, Richard, Marcus said, his voice steady. It's over. Cunningham's shoulders slumped as the realization hit him like a freight train. His grip on the company, his grip on everything he had built, was slipping away. The board members, once loyal to him, were now turning their backs. And it was all because of Marcus. It was over, not just for Cunningham, but for the company's culture of discrimination and corruption. The stage was set for a new beginning. And Marcus Ellis, the pizza delivery boy who had been underestimated for so long, was now the one holding all the cards. The room was heavy with anticipation. The tension was palpable as everyone waited for what would happen next. Marcus had just exposed the deep flaws within TechNexus Solutions, shattering the illusion of a flawless, untouchable company. Richard Cunningham's grip on his position was weakening by the second, but no one knew exactly how this would end. Cunningham's face was contorted with a mix of disbelief and anger. He had never imagined this moment, his empire crumbling because of a young delivery guy who had dared to challenge him. His mind raced, looking for an escape, some way to salvage his reputation and his company. But the more he struggled, the more he exposed his true self. "You think you've won, don't you?" Cunningham finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've shown a video, made a few accusations, but you have no idea what it takes to run a company like this. You don't understand the stakes." Marcus stood motionless, his eyes cold. He wasn't trying to win a petty argument or drag out the confrontation for the satisfaction of being right. He was here for a bigger purpose, a purpose that went beyond personal triumph. It was about justice, about ensuring that people like Cunningham didn't continue to profit from greed and discrimination. "I don't need to understand the politics of corporate power, Richard," Marcus replied, his voice calm yet unwavering. "What I understand is what's right and what's wrong. You've been hiding behind your title, making decisions that hurt the very people who built this company. And now, you have to face the consequences." The silence in the room grew deafening. Every eye was fixed on Cunningham, waiting for his next move. Some of the engineers exchanged nervous glances, wondering what was coming next. Was Marcus really going to change everything? Could he dismantle the system that had been built by people far more powerful than him? Cunningham took a step back, his face flushed with rage. He was clearly grasping for control, but his confidence was slipping away. "You can't do this. You don't have the authority," he spat. "You think the board will listen to you? You think they'll believe a word you say after this stunt? You'll be lucky if you're not escorted out of here in handcuffs." Marcus's response was cool and calculated. "I don't need to be a CEO to know that what you've been doing is wrong. The board doesn't have to hear from me. They'll hear from the people who have been silent for too long. They'll hear from the people who know the truth." The weight of Marcus's words hung in the air. He wasn't just talking about exposing Cunningham's corruption anymore. He was talking about changing the very foundation of how things had been done at TechNexus. The engineers, who had once been silent observers, were now on the edge of their seats, realizing that this wasn't just about a tech solution. This was a revolution in the making. As the tension thickened, Cunningham finally seemed to crack. His earlier bravado was gone, replaced by panic. He shot a glance at Dr. Harrison, who stood silently in the back, arms crossed. The VP of Technology hadn't said much, but his silence spoke volumes. The board, once Cunningham's stronghold, was now looking at the situation with new eyes. "I'll make sure you regret this," Cunningham growled, his words filled with venom. But even as he said it, he knew deep down that his time was running out. The room had shifted. The power dynamic had changed. Marcus didn't respond to Cunningham's threats. Instead, he turned and walked toward the door, his head held high. He had already said everything that needed to be said. The silence that followed his departure spoke louder than any words could. The real battle wasn't over yet, but the first victory was in the books. Marcus had shown everyone the truth, and now there was no turning back. As Marcus walked out of the TechNexus building, the weight of everything that had just happened began to settle in. He had proven himself, not just to the engineers, the CEO, or the corporate world, but to himself. The truth he had revealed was more than just a business scandal. It was a deeper lesson about courage, self-worth, and the power of standing up for what's right. For Marcus, the journey wasn't just about solving a $100 million problem. It was about understanding that no matter where you come from, your background, or what others think of you, you have the power to create change. It's easy to let circumstances define you, to let the world tell you what you're worth. But Marcus had learned from his mother, Janet, that the only limits that truly exist are the ones you place on yourself. As a kid from a rough neighborhood in Oakland, Marcus had been written off by many. He'd been told he wasn't good enough, that his dreams were too big for someone like him. But he knew something deep inside, that brilliance doesn't need a fancy title or a prestigious degree. Comes from within. It's the drive to push forward, the hunger to learn, and the will to never give up, even when the odds seem impossible. One of the most powerful lessons Marcus had learned was the importance of perspective. While the engineers at TechNexus had been stuck in their rigid ways, following the same old methods and overcomplicating solutions, Marcus saw things from a different angle. He didn't have the same biases or limitations. He wasn't tied to the same systems, and that allowed him to find the simplicity in the problem. The solution was always there. It just took a fresh perspective to see it. This was true not just in business, but in life. How often do we find ourselves stuck in a situation, feeling like there's no way out, just because we're too close to the problem to see it clearly? Sometimes, all it takes is stepping back, reassessing, and looking at things from a different point of view. The answers are there, but you have to be willing to think outside the box. Another powerful takeaway from Marcus's journey was the importance of perseverance and resilience. His decision to turn down a full scholarship to Stanford wasn't easy. He had dreams, big dreams, but life had different plans. He could have let that scholarship slip away and given up on his future. Instead, he chose to work hard, learn on his own, and take care of his mom. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his reality. And in that reality, Marcus found his strength. The final lesson, perhaps the most important of all, was the value of integrity and standing up for what is right, no matter the cost. Marcus didn't back down when Cunningham tried to dismiss him. He didn't let his background or the insults from the engineers deter him. He knew what was at stake, and he knew that the truth had to come out. In doing so, he not only changed the course of his life but also exposed a system of corruption and injustice that had been thriving for far too long. Marcus's story wasn't just about tech, algorithms, or business. It was about breaking barriers, defying expectations, and proving that success isn't defined by where you start, but by how you fight for what you believe in. So, the next time you're facing a challenge, think about Marcus. Ask yourself, how can I look at this from a new perspective? Am I willing to push past my comfort zone and take a risk? And most importantly, am I willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard? Because, just like Marcus Ellis, you have the power to create change. It's all about how you choose to use it. 6 months had passed since Marcus Ellis had walked into TechNexus as a pizza delivery guy, challenged the CEO, and revolutionized an entire company. What had begun as an impossible task, solving a technical problem no one thought could be fixed, had turned into something far greater. Marcus had shown the world that brilliance doesn't come with a title, and that true leadership doesn't require a resume filled with prestigious degrees. It comes from understanding the value of hard work, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. TechNexus, once a company crippled by its own hubris, was now a model of innovation and fairness. Under Marcus's leadership, the company had not only bounced back from the brink of collapse but had also quadrupled its market value. The $100 million loss that had haunted them for months was wiped out, and the company's new system, thanks to Marcus's changes, was processing data faster than ever before, saving millions in operating costs every year. But the true change wasn't just in the tech or the numbers. The company culture had transformed. No longer was TechNexus a place where diversity was ignored and employees were undervalued. Now, it was a company where everyone had a voice. Marcus had made it a priority to build an inclusive, open environment where every employee, from the engineers to the janitors, felt respected. He had even implemented new training programs for leadership, ensuring that no one would ever have to face the kind of prejudice and discrimination his mother, Janet, had endured for years. Janet Ellis, once a janitor cleaning offices late into the night, had long since retired, living comfortably thanks to Marcus's efforts to ensure that all employees received fair compensation and benefits. The day Marcus had announced her retirement, he'd invited her to a special ceremony at the company headquarters. There, in front of the entire team, he told everyone how much she had sacrificed for him to have a better life, how her hard work and love had made everything possible. The standing ovation that followed brought tears to both their eyes. Marcus's story had spread far beyond the walls of TechNexus. He became a symbol of resilience and perseverance, featured in countless interviews, and even invited to speak at universities and tech conferences. People from all walks of life reached out to him, inspired by his ability to turn hardship into success and to challenge a system that had been rigged against him. His message was clear: no matter where you come from, no matter how many people doubt you, you can rise above it all if you're willing to work for it and stay true to yourself. At the annual TechNexus Award ceremony, Marcus stood on stage, accepting the title of CEO of the Year. As the applause echoed through the room, he thought back to that first moment when he'd stood in the lobby of TechNexus, a pizza box in hand, watching engineers scramble over a problem that had cost the company millions. He'd been underestimated, ignored, and ridiculed. But now, he was leading the very same company, leading it with the wisdom of someone who had learned that true success isn't just about what you know or what you've achieved. It's about lifting others up and never giving up on your dreams. Marcus adjusted his tie, a smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Funny," he said to the crowd, his voice strong but humble. 6 months ago, I was delivering pizza. Today, I'm delivering change." The crowd erupted in applause once more, but this time, Marcus wasn't just being celebrated for his achievements. He was being celebrated for proving that the underdog can rise, for showing that the people who are often overlooked are the ones who can change the world. And as Marcus stood there, looking out at the future he had built, not just for himself, but for the people around him, he knew one thing for sure: the best was yet to come.